Welcome to the latest episode of 305 Vox Populi, and we're in a different location. But first off, we're with Danny Angel, the director of our building department here in the town of Miami Lakes. How you doing, Danny?
How you doing, Mayor?
Appreciate you coming on, and we're at a cool spot. We're at P
74 East, aka Graham Park.
This is the spot where everybody loves hanging out. Todo mundo tira la foto de los 15, the campaign picture. I mean, you name it, it happens at this park because it's so picturesque. It's that iconic park right next to Main Street. I know it's one of the places that you love walking to all the time too, because it's really awesome, man. It's what Miami Lakes is all about.
Absolutely. I actually grew up just across the border, so this was a park that I would frequent almost on a weekend basis. Mom would drop me off on Main Street, go have movie, pizza, hang out here with friends, girlfriends sometimes. So.
And who knew all these years later, you actually maintained this park for a little while. So I think that's what this segment's all about, sharing Danny's story. Because I think when it comes to public service, stories like Danny are truly going to inspire the next generation of leaders that are going to serve the public, that are going to serve people. So when did you make that decision? What's your why when you said, you know what, I think I'm going to go into public service? Because that's a big leap in perspective, right? When you understand that what you're doing, yeah, you got to make money, you got to do it, but you're serving others.
You know what, Mayor? I was actually blessed, right? Growing up, I had two aunts that were already public servants at a local municipality. So I grew up around public service and bringing government to the people, closest to the people. So I got firsthand look. I still remember at 4 or 5 years old, attending one of my aunt's weddings and the mayor of that local municipality being there. And I thought it was so cool. And just everything that they would talk about to, like when we would have family gatherings and how prideful they were, right, of serving their community. So that was something that was always embedded in me. But the why and the turning point in my life was 9/11. 9/11, I still remember that it was yesterday, and I was actually working at a local municipality, not this one, and another one. And I still remember like if it was yesterday, watching those planes hit the building, standing with my colleagues and just being in shock. And then what happened to the country 24, 36, 48 hours after that, there was just all hands on deck, just trying to restore this country. And then that was something that just impacted me and just reshaped my perspective, and I just went full throttle into getting my degree in public service and public administration and going back to the roots, right? Because I understand government gets bad publicity, federal level, state level, but at the local level, we really have an opportunity to really impact people the most. And that's something that I take pride in, something that was part of my pedigree, and I actually had a brother as well too who's in public service. So that was my why, and that is my passion. And then, I mean, we could get into it. I mean, I could even go into my parents, right? Seeing how my mom raised us, and my house was the community house. She would serve the lunches, the dinners. She was always making sure that not only we were taken care of, but everybody in the community was taken care of. And seeing how happy that made her was something that was always embedded in me.
No, and I think what's so, and you're absolutely right, 9/11 kind of refocused. It was a terrible, terrible day in our nation's history, but you saw our country come together. And you're right, a lot of folks, our guest last week, because of 9/11, he joined the military. And wow. He's a master sergeant now, Chad Sorrentino, shout out to him. But hearing your story and seeing how that's impacted our generation is interesting, because now on the public service front, you've brought in, I think, a different perspective, right? Where a lot of times we're taught that, hey, if you do this and you're good at this, that's what you're going to do forever. And you're that guy that's like, hey, you know what? If I can master this, that means I can continue challenging myself and do this and do that, and bringing that servant attitude to everything you do. So you hit it on the head. You started off at another city. I think you were at a parks department. Was it at a parks department? What were you doing at that other city?
So my first official position, you were going to laugh at this, my title was reproduction apprentice. And I remember having to say that when I had to serve jury duty. Once the judge looked at me, he was like, what do you deal with? What is that? So I had to explain it. Essentially, I worked at a print shop. I managed the day-to-day printing. It was a major local municipality, so we did everything from the budget books to the flyers to the old NCR paper, the 3-part. Not only that, I would pick up all the mail from that municipality and distribute it in those pigeonholes back in the day. I would pick up the deposits from other departments. So I was essentially a do-boy. So that was my first position.
And what year was that?
1999.
And you were there doing that job for how long?
For about 3 to 4 years I was doing that. Then 9/11 happened, and I started getting more focused and serious about what I wanted to do. Because I grew up your average kid growing up in South Florida. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I had a great surrounding, I had a great nucleus, I had a great family. I knew that probably whatever I put my mind to, I could probably get it done. I always had that confidence, and it goes back to, I think we were talking about it earlier, was sports, right? I grew up around sports. 4 years old, everything, basketball, baseball, football, that's all I saw, that's all I watched. I would play, my brother's 4 years older, so I'd always playing against an older group of kids, and I think that really like solidified that if I could play against these kids, I could pretty much do anything, right? And to take it even a step back further, going back to what our parents did and their ultimate sacrifice, because my parents, Cuban, my dad and my mom both left everything that they had at another country, and they just started their life here. So if they were able to do that, I could do anything that comes my way. So those little things were embedded in me at a very early age, and yeah, I mean, and that's where we're at. And I forgot the question because I went off on several sidebars.
No. But you're absolutely right. Having that attitude, where was it great from? Talking about playing sports with bigger kids, saying, hey, you know what, I can do this. Understanding what our parents went through, right, to seek freedom for us, setting that foundation, and to be successful. But what was that next job after you went from the reproduction specialist, and back in from 99 to 03 you did that? So what was that next
Got
step?
it. So, and then that's what I was saying, like I started getting really serious about my health. I mean, Miami Lakes has been good to me in more ways than one, but I was getting really serious into my health, and I would work out during lunchtime. I would run laps around City Hall at the local municipality, and I had a director at the time. He was a community development director. I guess he would see me every time he'll go out to lunch, and one day he just asked me, he says, hey, do you want to be an inspector for me? And I said, sure, why not? That was always my attitude with everything in life. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. 2 weeks later, I became a code enforcement officer, getting trained with some great individuals. I worked with some great people back then. They taught me the ropes on what it is to be a successful code enforcement officer, applying my own prism on the world and things like that, and just applying the code. So I did that for about a couple years, got my degree, graduated magna cum laude,
Nice.
FIU, Public Administration. Go Panthers.
Nice.
Then from there, the mayor at the time hired me as an administrative aide, and I was essentially his grants manager. Had me at a different location, dealing with low-income individuals. That's where I got a lot of my compassion and empathy, because I saw folks from they were homeless, and I had to put them up in a motel using grant monies or paying for elderly's light bills one time a year. So I got a lot of my empathy and compassion during that stint. 6 months after that, Career Builder came out in 2007. I had a relative email it to me for code enforcement officer for the town of Miami Lakes. I always looked up to the town of Miami Lakes. It was always my dream. I would always drive around here. Always say I wanted to plant my family here. Submitted my resume, got interviewed, got hired August 13th, 2007. Town of Miami Lakes, and the rest is history.
Man, but that's fascinating. So going from the reproduction specialist, running around City Hall, having that conversation, going to be a code enforcement officer at that city, then being a grants administrator, right? Saying, hey, you think about just in those couple of years, everything you've had to learn and adjust and continue to challenge yourself, and then coming here to the town of Miami Lakes, making another leap of faith. Mm-hmm. How was that? Was that a full-time job first when you got here? How was it?
As a matter of fact, it wasn't, Mary. I signed up as a contractor, and I remember the resistance I was getting back home, especially from my parents, who obviously cared for my best. They were like, you're crazy, your aunt's retired from Hialeah, your brother's about to retire Hialeah, your life is set, why would you want to leave that? And I always had a bigger vision for my life. I love my aunts, I love my brother. They were great role models for me, but I wanted to do something different. I wanted to kind of test myself, see how far I could push myself, and just figure out if I could do things on my own, not follow their footsteps, but try to figure out my own path. So I did get a lot of resistance. I did start off as a contractor. I said, you know what? That was around that time as well too, where I started finding my faith in God as well too. So that started illuminating my path. There's a biblical scripture that has been impacting my life during that time, and it's still impacting every decision that I make. It says Isaiah 30:21 says, no matter whether you turn to your right or to your left, I'm going to whisper in your ear, I'm right behind you, step forward. So basically what that taught me was like, no matter what decision I make in life, God's always going to have my back. And if I could always just, worship him and give my faith for him, he's going to illuminate my path no matter what I do.
Well, we've seen that path, and you're absolutely right. God has his hand in all of this, especially if we listen, if we open up our hearts to him. But and we've seen that path for you here in the town of Miami Lakes. So going through that, being a part-time, and correct me if I'm wrong, but now I got here in about 2012, so I kind of know some of your history, but being a part-time code enforcement guy. And I think not only here, you had to work at another city to make ends meet. And I want folks to understand that. That's part of the grind that Danny went through to make sure he's providing for his family, for himself, doing well. But then a job came open here in the town. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was the assistant to the parks director.
Correct.
Danny was like, hey, I'm ready.
Absolutely.
I'm ready. Took that on, right?
Yep.
You did that for how long?
I did that for about 2 years on a contract basis, part-time. Well, it wasn't really part-time because I was putting a lot of time in here. I still maintained my other job because, like you said, I had to maintain me. Did that at a contractor position for about 2 or 3 years. And then the opportunity for parks director came up.
So the opportunity for parks director came up. Look at the path that he's taken, because taking the risk that he took, leaving a city that he was already, he was building up a pension, doing all, and he said, you know what, we got to do better. Became the parks director of one of the most dynamic park systems in South Florida, right? We have 4 very large parks, but then we have 100 plus small parks. We have greenways, we have trails that we have to maintain. How was that transition from part-time code enforcement officer, part-time assistant to the parks director, to now you're the guy, you're it?
Yeah, and I just want to probably rewind on that. During that time where I accepted the position, we had an interim director. So basically I had to learn the ropes. I remember my first day I had a file on my table, and they told me, hey, Danny, you have to figure out how to pay all these invoices, about 30 to 40 invoices. Luckily, God illuminated my path. There was an individual who was sitting right next to me. He was in procurement, but he knew Munis and he knew like our software. So he sat with me, he taught me, but a lot of it was just the tenacity to want to learn. I would come in on Saturdays, 8 a.m. My wife could testify. Edie, if you're watching, love you. And Duke, happy birthday, since we're doing family shout outs.
Happy birthday, Duke. Same birthday as my son Manny, so they'll be connected forever, their birthdays. So
amen. So yeah, I mean, coming in here on Saturdays and just the tenacity. I remember watching YouTube videos. I mean, I knew the basics of Excel and spreadsheet. I learned a lot in college, but I didn't know how to do pivot tables or anything like that. Watch YouTube videos, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, whatever it took. Spend restless nights trying to figure out how I could improve my skill set to make the town better, and ultimately to make me a better professional as well too, in delivering that service to the community.
And I think that's so powerful, because a lot of times people limit themselves in our society. They're like, man, I went to school for X, Y, and Z, so I can only do X, Y, and Z. But that story that you shared, showing up on Saturdays, on Sundays, watching YouTube videos, developing yourself, led to something else. That procurement director that had helped you learn Munis and the other processes, when he left, there was a vacancy. And I remember that. So we're a contract city. We only have, a couple dozen employees in-house. Everything else is contracted out. You're talking about dozens and dozens and dozens of contracts and constantly procuring things. And Danny said, hey, I'll be the interim procurement director. But that in itself, I think, has led you to where you're at today. But talk to us about what you had to learn to be, not only juggle being the parks director, right? Which you did a great job. You always, one of the things that I think you brought to the table was your ability to resolver. Not only for the government that you were, but for the people. If there was an issue, it wasn't like, I think a lot of times we get answers like, bueno, that can't be done.
Right.
You're like, well, wait a second. Let's work, have that empathy. Let's work with people. And I think it went back to what you said when you were that grants administrator in Hialeah.
Right.
That you saw the world in other people's, in their shoes. You stood in their shoes and in their eyes, and that allowed you to create that ability. Hey, let's make it happen. But understanding, having that attitude, and being the procurement director while also being the parks director, how was that?
And I just want to go back to mom and pops, right? I remember growing up, my mom would say no, and I would say why. For everything. I mean, we have kids, right? I'm sure you're going through that struggle as well too.
Every day.
No, but why? So I was always curious about the why. So in government, and especially in the role that I'm in right now, I have to say no a lot. We're a regulatory agency, but I also want to provide that customer the why. And I think that has made a big difference in the way that I deliver service, or the way that I render any type of services. I want to, if I tell the resident or whoever comes into the door, no, I want to tell them why I cannot do something, or why we cannot do something. So I think inserting just the empathy that I learned growing on, and you're absolutely correct. Anybody who walks into that door, I'm already putting myself in their shoes. So I'm already listening. I want to listen. A lot of folks come in, they just want to vent, they'll complain, they'll do this and that, but ultimately they have something to say. So I try to filter everything out and just try to put myself in that person's shoe, and I want to leave those doors feeling good. So how can I do that? I have the power to do that. I can, even if I have to say no, I want to say, hey, no, but we'll figure something out. And I think that has led to some of my successes professionally and privately as well too.
So that process of being the parks director and being
I didn't answer that. Sorry.
No worries, and being the procurement director, how did that prepare you for your future? Just juggling two very different jobs, two very different worlds, demanding on their own. How did you? Very few people can do that, right? Take two. You're the director of a very dynamic parks department and the director of one of the busiest procurement departments at the same time. And it's not like. And I want to make this clear, because in a lot of other cities, there's a huge bureaucracy, right? So the directors, not all of them, but in many occasions, are just figureheads, and they have 45,000 people working for them. Here in the town of Miami Lakes, it's you. You got to grow. So how did you make that happen?
So I was able to apply some of the skills that I had learned in code enforcement, because we do have a procurement ordinance. So I was able to pick that up, read the code. That's my guidelines. Those are what I have to work with. But on top of that, inserting my people skills. One of the first challenges that I had when I stepped in was there was some type of contract negotiation with, not a contract, but a dispute with a specific contractor. So in that specific scenario, I was able to apply my empathy, knowing what I can do within the ordinance, and we're able to provide something to the contractor that basically kept the town out of liability, kept the contract liability, everybody was happy. So that was one of my first challenges, procurement area. But I think it was just, we got to go back to what it means to work for government. We're public servants. We're here to serve. And I got to go back to my faith, go back to Jesus Christ. The way that he led was serving. So that's what I apply every single day. I walk into the office every morning. I'm the one that's making Cuban cafecito for my staff members. I'm talking to them. I'm checking in how they're doing. I'm not going in there saying, hey, where's this permit? Where's that? No, I want to know more about you, because I think once we start putting value into the person, they're going to deliver for you no matter what. So it goes back to that, and just applying that every single day with what I do. And
that prepared you for where you're at today, right? And being the director of a building department. There's only how many in Dade County?
Building directors or building departments?
No, building departments.
About 35, maybe 34, 35?
Including the county, there's 35.
Yeah.
So you're 35 in an entire county. I mean, how did your entire experience prepare you what you're doing today? Because you're right. That's probably one of the most powerful in terms of regulatory positions in South Florida, right? You tell people yes or no every day based on certain guidelines, based on the discretion that you're giving. So how did your entire process help you at where you're at today?
Yeah, I think it starts from the beginning, right? Like I started the podcast from just being raised within that environment where my mom was serving the community, applying, seeing what two of my aunts worked in the building department. One of them worked in the building department, worked in HR, learning from that. And then I am I love current events. So I love studying and researching. That's what I read. That's what I do. So just because that gives me a good pulse of what's happening, not only within the town of Miami Lakes, but in the locality, Miami-Dade County, the state, and the federal level. So applying all of those within my domain here, and then just applying all the skill sets that I've been able to learn that God has provided for me, right? Is going to school for public administration, is being in code enforcement, grants administrator, procurement, all of those I would have to deal with people on a day-to-day basis, apply the code that you all adopt as elected officials, and making sure that it's done in an ethical way, right? That's the biggest thing, is making sure that it's done correctly. making sure that it's done efficiently, and always trying to find a solution no matter what. I always tell my residents, and it's always true, I mean, there's a solution to everything minus taxes and death, right? And even with that, you get a good IRS attorney, you could probably get out of some trouble. And then the way with science and technology, who knows about the death part, but that's a story for another day. But I think there's a solution for anything and everything. And then you look around what's happening around, it's kind of disheartening, right? Sometimes you turn on the news, the discourse that's happening at the federal level and the state level and the local level, and I think what we're missing as a society as a whole is just a conversation. One of the things that I've been able to implement in the building department, if you get 2 denied comments, I'm demanding a meeting in person, on Zoom. I want to see you face to face with myself, with the reviewers, with whoever it is, because I think face to face we'll be able to eliminate 90% of the issues locally and in this country.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, and I'll share with you the story. When we were coming together with the building department committee, everybody was appointing, building professionals, architects, contractors. I was like, man, no, we need somebody that looks at it from a different lens, from a consumer lens, right? So I appointed Carlos Fernandez Guzman. Shout out to Carlos, a great friend of mine, a great Miami Laker. He's the CEO of Pacific National Bank. And I remember the one thing that Carlos told me about you. He was like, man, when Danny came in, he was a sponge. He was sitting there trying to see where we can create, where we can work together, how we can improve things. And I think that attitude, and you're right, because that's part of the issue we're having nationally and statewide and everywhere, is that everybody thinks that they got the answer, right? Especially in positions like that, or even mayors, right? Everybody's like, no, yo soy más inteligente. I'm the smartest guy in the room. The reality is we're not, and all of us, everybody can continue to get better and learn every day. And that's something that Carlos said about you. So how do you, today, what are those achievements that you see, that you feel that you've done for the residents of the town of Miami-Dade?
Within the building department,
yeah,
I think it's just that phone call, right? That concierge service that we're providing, where folks are coming in, and if they have an issue, we're trying to handle it right there on the spot. I know other municipalities, whether they're bigger or they're short-staffed, whatever the case may be, you have to set up an appointment, things like that. We try to eliminate that. We try to get you in the door, try to figure out a solution, if not, try to get you in a Zoom call. That's one of the things that came out of the committee, is trying to have more of that customer service element. A couple of technology things is that we've been implementing just recently is when you want to schedule an inspection with one of your permits, right on the permit card, we put a QR code where you scan it right off the phone, and the contractor, the resident, could go ahead and schedule inspection, and we'll schedule it right for the next day. So trying to make that experience, because I understand that dealing, especially with building departments, it could be a little intimidating, especially homeowner who doesn't know, wants to install windows. We've made the owner-builder process a lot more easier with providing specs and detail sheets if you want to install a fence where you don't have to get an engineer, just to make it easier. We're still applying the minimum requirements of the Florida Building Code, and that's very key, is that we're in charge with applying the minimum requirements of the Florida Building Code. Where some folks get in trouble is they try to apply the maximum of the Florida Building Code, or whatever they think is the maximum. So that's something that philosophically we've been able to hire and get a team in there that they understand the philosophy that we're applying the minimum requirements of Florida Building Code. They all know what they're doing. We have a great team in there now, and we're here. They understand what the mission is we're here to serve. We're public servants. At the end of the day, we're servants, and we're here to serve. We understand we have to say no, but there's a way of saying no, and there's a way of helping folks out. And I think that has been extended over the last couple of years within our department.
And that's a phenomenal message. It's especially in government, and not only in government, it just happens everywhere. CEOs in the private sector, they get these positions of power and immediately sit back and they're like, well, my predecessor did X, Y, and Z, and that's what we're going to keep doing. Danny got in there, it's like, hey, we can continue to improve. And that's a great lesson for folks in the public sector and the private sector. We can all continue to get better. If you feel that you're the best one today, there's going to be somebody that is going to eat your lunch at some point if you don't get better. So Danny's a great example of that. So 2 things that we do a little different. We handed over Ariel, Albert, some of the students, any questions that they might have, and then you get to ask me, and then we'll close it out.
So yeah, I think the most important thing here, the takeaway from your story, it's, how you kept growing. And a lot of times people tell you, like, without a connection, you're not gonna make it anywhere. And it doesn't really seem to be your case. So I kind of want you to send a message out there to the kids and to everyone that's watching the show as to, like, how pretty much hard work pays off, and how what you think made your history, at least this specific lesson, so important.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I think if it's a message for the younger generation, by the way, you guys always win. So just keep moving forward. Don't be scared of anything. Don't listen to anything. I know that unfortunately society has become, especially with social media, that you turn on your phone, you look at a social media page, and you want to try to compare yourself to somebody. You have your own story. Everybody has their story. You were put here for a specific reason, for a specific problem, for a specific solution. Keep on working every single day. Apply yourself and dedicate yourself to whatever it is that you want to do. In my story, I'll be completely honest with you. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I was surrounded around folks who worked in in local government, and that was something that was always interested in me. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, it took a life event to shift my perspective. And it's going to happen to you at one point or another. Hopefully it's not as bad as it was in 9/11, but something will happen that shift your focus. Take that opportunity, keep working very, very hard, and don't be scared. I know that unfortunately, you listen to things or you watch things or you things that they're like, no, you can never do it. And it happens to the closest folks around us, right? They're the ones that want to say, no, don't worry about it. We know better. No, you have your own path, and as long as you have breath in your lungs and your heart is beating and you have blood running through your veins, you have a purpose in this world. And I'll be completely frank. Find your faith in God, because that's what establishes the foundation. Once you establish that and you have that faith in God, that you can have that conversation with somebody every single day, and people probably like saying conversation. No, it's just putting your thoughts out there and having that spirit guide you to your next step. And I think that's the key to my success. And I don't know if that was the key to Manny's success, but that's something that was set a foundation for me, and that's what has kept me moving forward.
God is good. You guys got anything else?
Yeah, I have a question. What is the biggest challenge of being in your position?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What is the biggest challenge of being in your position?
I think the biggest challenge is trying to make everybody happy, right? I'm in a department right now where it's regulatory, and like I said before, is we have to say no a lot because we want to make sure that whatever people are doing, I'll give you an example, if they're installing windows, that if a hurricane comes, that it's hurricane proof and things like that. So I think the biggest challenge is making folks aware of why we say no and making them fully understand. And I get it, right? We're not going to make everybody happy. I mean, it's the whole 80-20 rule, right? Where we're not going to make everybody happy. But as long as you keep that mission, that you just want to explain your side and why it is that we do what we do, I think that's going to take you far in a lot of places.
Thank you, guys. Great questions. Danny, anything for me? We turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, first off, kudos. I know you're a recent master's grad at St. Thomas University, and you want to go for your doctor. So I guess the question is, what are you going to go for?
In leadership, character leadership, right? I want to keep going down that path. I think I've realized during my time in public service, right? I used to be an aide in the legislature. I've been now in the Miami Lakes Council for over a decade, 11 years. Own businesses, done it, but what I realize is that on the leadership side, we need to continue to develop leaders that are ethical and who have the high standards for their character, right? And I think those are the ones, when you see that in an organization, it helps move forward, creating that foundation, right? Through God, but specifically God empowering those who have the proper ethics. And you always hit on the head. So yeah, it'll be in leadership. So we're moving forward in that front. I know Ariel's going to get his master's soon, so he's working on that. Where Albert's going to school too. But yeah, man, we got to keep getting better. I know that's something you're doing as well, right? Continuing to educate ourselves, because the worst thing that could happen is if I became mayor and I'm like, soy el alcalde, soy el más inteligente del mundo. No, I can continue getting better every day. So if I show people in our community, in our staff, I went out and got my master's, I'm going to keep getting better. That means everybody can get better some way, somehow. It doesn't mean you have to get a degree in something, but like you said, you can learn on YouTube. Wherever it is, you have to continue challenging your brain and in understanding that don't hit that plateau. Keep getting. There's always an opportunity to improve.
Second question. So your political career is coming up here in Miami Lakes. No, I'm not going to ask that question. I get that. But I don't know, and I know that I've watched some of your podcasts, but I don't know if anybody's asked you what's your why.
What's my why? As to do what?
The same way you started the conversation with me.
Oh, for public service, man. So I be honest with you, when I when I became an aide in the legislature, it opened up my eyes to a different world, right? We were kids from Hialeah, Miami Lakes, growing up in the parks. That's where we first met, right? Playing basketball together in the parks as kids. And then once I had that opportunity, I was like, man, we can really not only change the world, but change our communities by getting involved, by just being at that table, right? And having those conversations. So when I ran for council, I was like, I feel that I can do a better job than the folks that were there. To be very honest with you, that's how I felt. I was like, we have to do better. And I hope my hope for this town, I don't want to look back in 20 years and people are like, Manny Cid, you're the greatest. No, I want people that are better than me to come after me and set that foundation and keep getting better. And that's something that I really believe in, is in servant leadership, where you give of yourself, as much as you can, you help your community, and you move on, and you allow those folks to keep getting better, keep improving, keep it, so yeah, my why was that I truly felt that things can improve, and not only for me, but as a community, right? There was a different mindset. I remember there was some folks here in the town that were like, man, the town was great in the 1970s, and the town was, but the reality is we have to get better, right? You can't, last night I was watching on TV, they had Route 66. Right? That's the famous route throughout the United States. Back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, that was, everybody vacationed on routes because it went all the way to the Santa Monica Pier. Today, there's nobody that lives on the route because they didn't get better, right? They didn't keep improving. And what happened was somebody ate their lunch along the way. There was different highways that got built. And better, faster highways, the turnpikes, the interstates. And what happened was it was left behind. And that's what's happening with cities throughout our country. Right? There's cities that are disappearing because they didn't get better. But yeah, I'm going off and on, but my why was that I am a big believer that in everything that we do, nobody's ever, even LeBron James, right? Nobody's ever the best. There's always going to be somebody that is going to at some point, right? So that's why we have to keep improving. So my why was that I felt that our town can do better, and I tend to believe that 11 years in, everybody is, or at least not even the 80-20 rule, the 85-15 rule, at least 85% of our residents truly believe that our town is better off today than it was 11 years ago.
And last but not least, we're here live, 2024 plans.
Yeah, we'll see. We're definitely going to do something countywide. I think it's time to pivot from the legislative side, even more the leadership side, pivot towards the executive position. So we'll see. That's where we're heading. I think the experience is there, everything's there. So stay tuned. So I'll let everybody know. But Danny, I think your story's been inspirational to the youth, especially people that are looking for careers in public service. And these are careers that are very, very fulfilling. And you hear from Danny's stories. It's not just because sometimes there's this misconception that it's just a paycheck that people get because they get to leave at 4 o'clock and you get all these vacations. No. There are people like Danny that are going above and beyond to make sure that your lives are better. So what words of inspiration, motivation do you have for that next Danny Angel?
I'm going to keep it very short. It's a book that I just recently read. It's called The Obstacle is the Way. And it's basically show you, and it uses stoicism. It applies stoicism, and there's different segments of the book about perception in life, action, and your will, right? And essentially the bottom line of that book is that the trial always leads to triumph. Wherever there's a challenge, there's always greener grass on the other side. But that challenge is there for a reason, and it's there for you. If you see that challenge and nobody else is taking on that challenge, that means it's for you. And that's something that career-wise, that has been my goal, right? And my mom reminded me the other day. She was like, I remember when you were a kid, you said you wanted to learn every single department in City Hall. This was back when my aunts were in City Hall. So I think I always had something in me. And then I see challenges within, our organization or just within our community and stuff like that. And I know I'm here for a reason, and I know I'm here for that purpose. And it's just inserting myself into that, and you'll be surprised how much you will learn. Even if, and like you said, I didn't know what was procurement. I didn't know any of those things. And now I wouldn't consider myself an expert, but I have a lot of knowledge in those different fields. And the best is yet to come. I can't wait till what the future holds.
Right, there you have it. Danny Angel, one of South Florida's greatest public servants, working hard to deliver services for you every single day. So tune in next Wednesday on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook,